Right then. Hi, Gary. Good to see you. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Paul. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. So today we're going to talk about ITSM, that broad topic which you and I do so much work on, but really under the framing of this newer phrase we're hearing, which is service management with IT. So I wonder if we were to start with, I suppose, some of the basics. What is ITSM? What's ITSM to a user listening today?
Put simply, ITSM or IT service management is the provision of or the management of services that are based around or provided by information technology. So you could think of things like sending emails, processing a payment through a website, ordering something through a website. Internally, it could be requesting some annual leave through an internal HR system. All of those are examples of using IT to provide a service to you, the customer, where you're asking for something and you get something in return.
Right. And then and obviously what that means is every company has teams in it, which means every team can benefit from using IT in the delivery of their service in some fashion.
Yeah, I think unless you lived in a cave, you interact with some kind of IT service pretty much every day of your life. Every time you pick up a phone, look at a website, order a pizza, you name it, it's going to be the same. And likewise within a business, every time you contact an internal team, ask them to provide something else, maybe you contact suppliers, all of those involve a degree of someone providing a service to something else, where fundamentally information technology is at the base of it.
Great. Thank you. That's a good explanation. So why don't we narrow the focus slightly and think about IT teams, so technology teams in businesses, be it providing, typical IT type support and widening out that angle, and their usage of technology to provide that service in a business. If you could maybe expand upon that slightly.
Yeah, so the acronym ITSM is often strictly applied to where an internal IT team provides services to the rest of the business. So that tends to be things like your internal IT help desk, where you request problem resolution, maybe with a device you've got, like a laptop or a printer or a phone, or you request a new piece of hardware, you request a new piece of software, or you request access to another system, or perhaps you're, as well as reporting an incident or a problem, maybe you're working on a solution to it, and so you might interact with the IT service desk that way. Or you're looking to actually release new software or new applications, and so you might interact with the IT service desk through raising a change request to actually make those changes. So strictly speaking, ITSM covers a broad range of topics, but classically within the kind of industry, ITSM often specifically relates to IT operations teams and IT help desks. And through that, you've probably heard terms like ITIL, which is been around for 20 plus years and is a kind of international framework for how service management should be done with IT, basically.
Right. And what advancements have we seen within those teams? Again, think about IT from where maybe someone's watching this and they go, yeah, we've got a service desk. Because we've had, we've had it for years, but it's fine. People can raise tickets, it's fine. How do we expand that topic to talk about what's new and changing in this IT world?
So ITSM has changed, and IT service management has changed a lot actually over the last sort of 20, 30 years. In fact, when I talk about ITIL is on its fourth iteration now, and the difference between the fourth and third iterations are quite stark. Lots of things had to be changed. So if you're using if you have IT help desk software today, chances are you're probably using something that's 10, 15, maybe even 20 years old, and was probably put in place that long ago and was designed to work that way. And sort of 10, 15 years ago, IT service management was very siloed and very sort of team driven. So you would, if you raised a request, say for you had a problem with a laptop and you raised it, that would be directed and routed through to like a laptop servicing team who would then help you fix it. What's changed over the last sort of 10, 15 years is the whole landscape is different. I mean, not just through distributed working, where everyone's people working from home, hybrid environments, on the road or in the office, but we've got cloud infrastructure that really wasn't around 10, 15 years ago. This idea where you have big data centers doesn't really exist anymore, because so much of that is now either through software as a service or through cloud-based infrastructure. And so it's had to modernize. And so recent IT service management tooling in particular very much focuses on more agile, more lean ways of working, and actually embracing some of the things that have been learned from agile software development, and actually bringing some of those techniques, in fact, aligning in a lot of the time those kind of techniques and workflows to service management as well. Even simple things, to give you a really good example, in IT service management a few years ago, you'd look at resilience and your ability to fail over to another site. Well, today with cloud infrastructure and the flexibility it provides, some of that is not necessary anymore. And so what you tend to find is that now, rather than having heavy resilience and lots of preemptive prevention, what a lot of systems now do is they allow them to fail. They just have very, very fast recovery, so you never actually see it happen. So it's a kind of change in mindset, really.
And thinking about the agile word, which springs up everywhere, it's certainly been in our ecosystem for well over a decade. How can you give some practical examples of that within IT? Because sometimes I think people hear we've got to do an agile transformation. It sounds big, it sounds heavy, it sounds a bit scary sometimes. But what techniques are being used to solve problems quickly, whether that's swarming or those type of topics? How's that impacting that area?
Yeah, and in fact, there tends to be a lot more lean than agile, but where agile comes into IT service management, it tends to be around things like DevOps and the things like where your continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous deployment. So as soon as a development team has made a fix to something or added a new feature, it's instantly deployed to a target environment. You may hear terms like green-blue environments, where a business will actually run their live infrastructure split into two, and so they can constantly deploy the work to it as the developers actually finish their sprint, or actually even deploy their code within the sprint, and that code is then instantly updated to say the one of the blue-green environments, which is not customer facing, and then at some point they'll just flip them, so all of a sudden the customer then gets access to all the new features. So it means you can run kind of two live environments that are constantly being updated essentially by your developers. So that's very much embracing the agile philosophy. In the broader term, within the remainder of kind of the IT service management discipline, then lean techniques have come in a lot more. So using things like Kanban, using some lean techniques like katas, where you basically learn repeated actions that can be performed very quickly. And things like incident swarming, which you mentioned, which is where, rather than when a major incident occurs, you kind of fumble around trying to work out which team you should assign it to, and you assign it to the wrong team, and so they assign it back to you and you assign it to a different team. Rather than actually doing that, you have katas that establish getting a swarm of people very quickly on the incident from every team, and then that swarm identifying who is the best person to fix it. So rather than trying to second guess who it should go to, you get everyone to look at it, and then the people who should be picking it up can quickly identify, actually, this is a problem in my area, and we'll get on it straight away. So that's where some of the lean techniques have started to creep in.
Right. And then what technology have Atlassian themselves brought into their product suite or their platform to help with that type of work, that swarming idea, solving problems quickly and instantly?
So funny enough, Jira Service Management has embraced this from the beginning. It was specifically designed to support a lot of the new concepts in ITIL version 4, so very much lean and agile. Obviously, the Jira platform itself already supported lean and agile methodologies for engineering teams and software development teams. But a lot of that ethos made its way through into Jira Service Management. So in particular, on incidents, out of the box, it encourages you to swarm incidents. So when an incident is raised, you can actually have the incident appear in multiple queues at the same time, depending on the different types of impacted service or impacted infrastructure that's affected. The Jira Service Management uses this thing called a service registry, which basically means that whenever an incident or a change occurs, you can actually link those incidents and changes to these business services and quickly identify the impact that they might have. So, for example, if you were looking to maybe upgrade your billing application server or billing application system, then when you raise the change request in Jira Service Management, it will automatically identify if there's any conflicting changes or any incidents that are currently ongoing that could have an impact on that change without you having to do anything else by using this service registry.
Right.
So it's basically been built from the ground up to support a lot of these more lean and agile methods within ITSM.
Okay, and then what sort of benefit does it offer, say, a product owner in a swarm scenario or a service owner? What scenarios, the old world, maybe they're flapping around, picking up mobile phones, ringing people, texting people, and which is very frustrating in the business world. How will that impact them? You know, how does it work practically? Do you get an alert on Slack or Teams? How does it work in the real world?
Yes, that's a good point. So one of the things that underpins Jira Service Management is a thing called Opsgenie, which is really the engine, particularly behind incident management. So Opsgenie is another Atlassian product, but it's actually integrated into and part of Jira Service Management. Essentially, what it allows you to do is receive alerts from different sources and then notify the person or persons on call for the respective services that there is potentially an issue or even an incident occurring. So you may have, for example, particularly a lot of cloud infrastructure, you may have monitoring tools like Datadog or Pingdom, things like that, just checking to make sure everything's running. Those can often be early warning signs that something is about to go wrong. And so those monitoring tools can send things called events or alerts through to Opsgenie, which can then process those, identify who is responsible for those services within the business, and then notify whoever's currently on call based on the on-call schedule to say, hey, you maybe need to look at this. If there's then a major incident, again, the swarming technique can be supported through Opsgenie simply by the fact that when the incident's raised, you identify the services that are impacted, and it will send notifications to all those people who are supporting that service at the moment based on the current on-call schedule. And those people will get a push notification to their phone, an SMS message, a phone call, or an email, telling them that, you know, there is something that requires their attention, and they can get on it straight away. And all of that is fully automated. So it can actually, from within maybe a second and a half of a major incident being raised, you could have notified by SMS everyone that you want involved in the swarm, and they could then be accessing the ticket within seconds, as opposed to going through a service desk, getting it assigned to a queue, waiting for someone to pick it up from the queue, determining it's not them, passing it on to somebody else, and then bouncing around until it hits the right person. Yeah,
and we've heard that scenario many times with customers relaying that story to us. It's interesting whenever we describe that and they go, oh, you know, I have actually experienced that in real life.
Yeah, the hot potato, as it's often known.
Yes, that phrase. Now, obviously, you've talked about quite a lot of stuff there. Some of it could sound quite technical. From your experience, you're working with an IT team, they're a service management team today. They know they can do more for the business, but obviously they don't have the right processing and tooling. How long would it take typically to get a team from almost that, what I'd call the old-fashioned way, raise a ticket, fix a problem, answer the same blooming question every day, 5 times a day, to this newer world, self-service, answer the deflection of tickets, and then the swarming aspect from an education perspective?
So from a technical point of view, if we were looking at, say, maybe using something like Jira Service Management, we find we can transition our customers from a legacy tool through to Jira Service Management, typically including training, coaching, mentoring, you know, a little bit of hand holding, typically in as little as 4 to 8 days in total over the period of sort of 3 to 4 weeks. It's very, very quick. In fact, Jira Service Management comes with a lot of stuff pre-configured. So actually, it's just a case of just tailoring it for your business, really. And that can be done extremely quickly. We normally have a working prototype, as we call it, up and running within, you know, a day, actually. And then it's just a case of just adding more layers of functionality and tailoring to that to kind of build it up to tailor it for your business. In terms of some of the more exotic and more modern ways of doing things like incident swarming, you can set up the processes to do that very quickly because they're nearly all out of the box. Sort of 90% of it is out of the box, actually. But obviously there is a cultural change, and cultural change does take time, but you can kind of have a blended approach with that. So you can continue to use your queue-based, assignment-based, what we call resolver groups, in the way you worked in your legacy tool. But over a period of sort of 3 to 6 months, you can start to introduce, for example, on major incidents, you could start to introduce the swarming concepts, use the tool to actually accelerate that. And you actually find over sort of a very short period of time that people start to realize and understand that swarming is a much better concept in terms of resolving incidents. And so you'll get that cultural shift, but cultural change always takes a bit more time.
Of course. Yeah. And I think this aligns nicely with the idea of if you yourself you know this is the right future path for your organization, or maybe your team. This is where aligning with somebody, some executive in the organization, showing them the future. And the point being, these changes from an investment perspective are, reasonably low cost, to be honest. And then the cultural change is that 3 to 6 month window. But this isn't the same as, moving to a DevOps based process, is it? It's actually all a few steps away. So I think the point I'm trying to point across is that this is all viable for any size of business, from a team of 3 or 4 people, and even starting with the basics, saying, look, tell me about the last time you had a major incident. Typical example is it's a sunny day, it's the weekend, and your phone's going off. That is a real life scenario that these people who live in this world experience. And we can show you and estimate that path to the success, and then get someone who's passionate about this future behind you. And then you can change the company around in a very short space of time, gain massive benefit from it, but at relatively low cost in terms of an investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth remembering as well that the kind of landscape has changed slightly, because the days of old, when you had a major incident, you crowd everyone into a war room, you'd have things up on the screen. With distributed working and hybrid working, we don't have that anymore. So people live in Slack and MS Teams now, which of course fully integrate into the whole Jira platform. So you can use that to kind of drive a lot of that communication you were talking about. And in fact, when we talk about swarming now, swarming tends to be done in sort of, Teams and Slack, to be honest with you. You just get everyone together, get everyone discussing it, get a solution in place, and work around as quickly as possible. And that's part of this shift that we've seen over the last 10 years, particularly, following COVID. That's kind of accelerated, if anything, in that the digital transformation of providing these services has really grown. And it's not just now about having a help desk, it's now about all the other activity that you do around that help desk as well.
I think the irony here slightly is we love it. We love giving things fancy names in IT, don't we? But I think people are probably swarming over problems today using Teams. They're just, what they haven't got then is the alert to the specific incident. Do you know what I mean? And this
the bit that's tricky, the bit that's missing is knowing who to include in the swarm. So when you have an incident raised, if you're doing it manually, you'd have like a spreadsheet or something that says, okay, if these particular services or applications are impacted, these are the people you need to invite to the swarm. Well, that's a fairly manual process, and what happens if they're on annual leave and all that kind of stuff. So what tools like this do is they provide you with an automated mechanism of doing the tricky bit, which is to look up who's currently on call for this particular service, and how can I quickly add them to the swarm. And the thing with JSM and Opsgenie is that happens in a split second. It's all fully automated.
Because otherwise you're in that old world of, ring Dave, he'll know who to contact. And it's always, you're reliant on a human with knowledge, which we all have those superstars in our business. But what we're trying to do is build processes that are more robust than that, as you've just described. Okay, so I think this leads us quite nicely into the competitive landscape in the service management and IT world. Atlassian very proudly in the top right-hand corner in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Why do you think they've accelerated their position from Jira Service Desk from sort of 5 years ago to Jira Service Management, and are now basically hot on the heels of ServiceNow? What changes have you seen?
I think there's probably 2 factors, really. The first is that DevOps is very much driving the whole, I know DevOps is a bit of a nebulous term, this idea that your development and operations teams work much, much closer together, and something which has grown over the last sort of 15 years to the point now where it's so common, it's essentially fully established. But DevOps has kind of driven the demand for Atlassian-based service management tooling, because, of course, Jira and its integrations, plus things like Bitbucket and Bamboo and all these other things, are very much the leaders in the DevOps space. And so if you're looking to extend your DevOps to then to have a wrapper around them to provide full IT service management, then you're taking the platform that's already the market leader for DevOps, and you're just adding that service management layer around it, essentially. And that's basically what Atlassian have done over the past sort of 4 or 5 years with the launch of Jira Service Management, which replaced Jira Service Desk, and the massive growth of the product in terms of its capabilities and features over the last 2 or 3 years, is that they have taken that really solid foundation where all the developers and the engineers and the DevOps teams that were already using Jira, and now it provided a kind of rapid route really to then extending that to cover IT service management without the need to have a separate tool and all of those kind of clunky integrations that you might then have to put in place to keep the two linked.
Which means that Jira customers today have this real competitive advantage in whichever market they're playing in. They've made the investment in Jira. DevOps as a strategy is very much embedded now, as you described. Everyone's on this journey to cloud. Pareto law, at least 80 to 90% of customers will end up on the SaaS platform. So these features and capabilities are available now. I think it's quite exciting that Atlassian are in this position as the one biting at the heels of ServiceNow. Where do you think ServiceNow customers, we know it's used in a lot of places, it's obviously a very comprehensive product. What size team or user base do you think possibly are maybe not getting, feeling frustrated, or maybe they're not getting the ROI that they anticipated? Is there scenarios that you could think of there?
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I always use is that you can think of Jira like a rapid delivery van, like DHL or something like that. It's that kind of, it will carry your stuff from one place to another very quickly. It's lean, it's agile, it gets the job done. ServiceNow is very much a massive, great big truck that travels across continents. Yeah, so it can do. Its capability technically is more. It has a lot more features, but you'll probably not necessarily use the entire lot. So if you're moving house, a great big truck is going to be far too big than your needs than, say, a small van, which can carry your stuff to your new property. And that's the kind of analogy to think of the two tools. So for ServiceNow, because it is so big and because it has all these other kind of bolt-ons and capabilities that you'll probably never use, I would say that if you're supporting anything less than maybe 5, maybe 10,000 customers within your business, then ServiceNow is probably going to start to look a little bit like overkill, more expensive, big and cumbersome compared to what you actually need. If you've got 2,000-3,000 employees, maybe you've got a couple of thousand laptops out there. If you're doing, sort of classic IT service management, maybe you've got, cloud infrastructure and other bits of kit lying around. Maybe you're spread across 10, 20, 30 locations. Then something like Jira Service Management is going to be far more cost effective, far faster to set up, far easier to manage, and provide you all the capability that you need for the business of your size. And that's kind of true as well across the piece. So there are other competitors as well, which kind of operate in Jira Service Management space, like Freshdesk and Zendesk, for example. They're two others. But the things with those is that because they kind of operate in the same space, you also want them to be really well integrated into Jira, because everybody is using Jira for their development and their DevOps and their potentially a project management as well. So JSM kind of solves that problem, because you're then not having to have integration layers between your service management tool and your dev and testing and DevOps tooling. It's all in one place. It's all one platform. So you can have cross-referencing of information. You can have dependencies between things. You can even have the same people and assignments within the same product. And if you start looking at some of the more legacy tools that I often see, things like House on the Hill, which I've been working with recently, which has been around for about 30 years or something, right. Still quite popular. Yeah. Things like Cherwell, Remedy, some of these products that have been around a long time, they're very, very good at what they do, but they're finding it very difficult to adapt to this much more lean, agile, DevOps focused future. Whereas JSM has been built for the ground up, really, for that purpose.
Yeah, and that's one of the, I suppose, the beauties of entering the market as there's been this fundamental shift in ways of working. Like you say, okay, we're going to build the first version of the product, Jira Service Desk. We know what it can do, but now we're seeing this new world, and that is an advantage. There's a timing to that. I mentioned this in one of my other videos when we were talking to Jake. Humans, by their very nature, are very cyclical, as is IT. It's not a coincidence that these cycles continue to happen. And it's all about the company that makes the investment at the right time. As things change, they will naturally just flow up that Gartner Magic Quadrant and become more of a dominant force. So I think one of the takeaways is if you are using Jira today, you've got less than a few, maybe even 10,000 either employees, like you're saying, Gary, or customers or things you interact with. there's an ROI to be had here from a business pounds and shilling and pence perspective. But I think in terms of doing your job, the amount of times I hear people say, oh yeah, we had to get ServiceNow in, it took them weeks, it took them months to book them in. Certainly the approach that you use, Gary, and we do across our whole ITSM practice is we want to enable you to do it yourself.
Yeah,
and if you can't, we'll provide you with a support contract afterwards. What we're not trying to do is lock you into X amount of years of these old-fashioned style, man days a month style contracts that you can't leave. What we're saying is, look, it's flexible. Here's how you do it. Come to us if you need it, but you get going. You know your business better than we do. And I think that change of approach, not just from Clearvision and from Atlassian, I think that's the way employees want to work these days.
Yeah.
I don't think they like the idea of these large organizations looming over them, where they're like, let me do my job at my company because I know it better.
Yeah,
the cultural aspect to that.
Definitely. You're definitely more empowered. I would say it's probably the biggest difference between Jira and many of its rivals, or Jira Service Management, many of its rivals, is you as a customer are definitely much more empowered to just make changes yourself, and certainly when we do our training and when we do prototyping to help customers, get their JSM solution up and running as quickly as possible, what we're doing really is just showing our customers the best way of actually using the product and showing them how they can tailor it and customizing it moving forward, because service desk is never finished. I mean, in particular, you start introducing things like assets and configuration management. I mean, that never ends. You're constantly maintaining that and changing it and adding stuff to it. So it's important to understand how easy it is to maintain and modify that stuff, as well as the fact that you can get up and running pretty quickly as well. So, yeah, and you're right. I hear that all the time, particularly with ServiceNow. We've had a few customers who've moved from ServiceNow to Jira, and their main complaint was they couldn't change anything. And then when they're shown how they can change it in JSM and it takes a few seconds, their mind's blown.
Yeah, and it's lovely to see, actually, and I think that's a global cultural shift in the way people want to work. They want to be empowered, don't they? Because it brings more joy to the role. Simple as that. Now, obviously, that's like I say, very cultural. There's an empowerment aspect to everything we've talked about there. Now, don't get it wrong. Clearvision obviously provides outsourced services. There's always going to be organizations where that person says, look, I love them empowered. I'm getting great pleasure from this, but actually I want to do something more business critical. And what we've obviously done is build services that allow us to back off that particular work if you require it. But I think, like I say, most of the Atlassian customers, that's the angle we're seeing now. They want that empowerment, they want the change, and they want to be able to impact the business quicker.
It's a blend. I mean, there's always going to be tricky stuff. And that's obviously where we come in. But yeah, I think there's a healthy blend. There's enough in terms of it's simple enough you can get started. Obviously, if you want to create something that's really polished, that's using a lot of best practice and good practice, then obviously we can help with that as well in terms of providing either just advice or actually assisting with doing it as well.